Hi there, today's book is Don't Let Her Stay by Nicola Sanders. So at the beginning of this book, we see where a mom is racing into a car, putting her baby in, and trying to leave this house while she looks up to a window and sees this person in the window. So this is how it starts. All right, so once we leave that scene, we meet Joanne and her husband, Richard. They've been married for a few years, and she just had a little baby girl, Evie. So she's currently at home, staying at home with the little one. And her husband, Richard, is supposed to be some big businessman. He's supposed to be rich. They have this huge house out in the suburbs. And so she's at home with the baby during the day. So shortly after the baby was born, Richard's daughter, Chloe, reaches out and wants to come spend some time for a few weeks with them. Of course, he's ecstatic because they've had a strained relationship and they haven't talked. They've been estranged for a few years since he remarried. And so she was mad at him because of that. And so they hadn't talked. So even though he had been paying her way while she was in college and all that, they hadn't really been in touch. So he's happy. Of course, Joanne's happy for him because this is an opportunity for him to repair the relationship. So she's like, of course she can come and stay with us. So when she first arrived to the house, she notices that she's very clingy to her dad. She just latches on to him. And then when he's around, she has this almost baby whiny voice, even though she's like 20, 21. Which she thought was weird, but she's like, okay, well, maybe she's just happy to see her dad. Okay. And from the beginning, when Chloe's there in the house, she's kind of rude where she asks inappropriate questions. She says snarky things. And so she comes off as though she really hates her, even though she hadn't met Joanne before. So it was kind of a strange dynamic. So Joanne was in the process of hiring a nanny for Evie because she wanted to do some work part-time with her prior employer, working remotely to do some things for a few hours per week. So Chloe volunteered to watch her baby sister. And of course, Joanne didn't really want to do that because she didn't really know her. She seemed to hate her on top of that. However, it seemed as though Chloe has her dad at her fingertips, and so her dad is always coming to her defense against Joanne. And so this kind of puts a wedge in there, but I'm like, okay, well, that's her daughter, so I guess. So he kind of vetoes her decision to hire somebody else and says, he's making the decision that she needs to let Chloe watch her sister. So she had to relent and let her watch the baby. So when it came time for a meeting that she had asked Chloe to watch Evie so she could do her conference call. When the time came for the call, Evie is screaming and wailing and Chloe is nowhere to be found. So the call went horribly and she ended up having to leave the call to attend to Evie. She's coming and going, and then finally she had to bring Evie to her desk and she's on a video call. She tried to handle it the best she could. So when she confronted Evie later, when she finally made it back home, she's like, no, you didn't tell me I had to watch Evie. And she's saying, well, I can't be around all day if you don't tell me. I can't wait around for you for whenever you need me, which is not the case. She had told her about this meeting, and so she would do things like that to make it seem like she's crazy. Another thing that she did was she was supposed to have a birthday party, and so it seemed as though she told Joanne one thing and then told everybody else another thing. So when Joanne was thinking the party was a day, the following day, Richard was asking her how the party was coming along and asking her about the stuff that happened the day of. And she's like, it's tomorrow. And she's like, what are you talking about? And of course, Chloe's saying, I told you. And she's up in arms and upset. And Richard is annoyed. And another thing is that, Joanne's mom had some mental issues. And so Richard is now bringing this up. Are you sure you're okay? I'm worried now because you're forgetting stuff. And, so she's annoyed as well because why is he bringing it up? She's fine. And it seemed as though Richard doesn't really believe her when she's telling her about the stuff that's happening with Chloe. So that's causing them to have, causing a little wedge in their relationship. So it's almost as if every day that Richard comes home, there's something, as soon as he walks through the door, hey, is everybody okay? You know, well, this happened today. And so he's getting annoyed as well. So he's just blindly on his daughter's side, which, I can somewhat understand, but at the same time, wrong is wrong. Another thing that happened was when the baby was teething, and so she had asked Richard to get the medicine for her on the way home. And so when she went upstairs at the end of the night, she noticed Chloe was in the bathroom, and Chloe had the medicine, and she was holding it up, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And so she's like, "Oh, I heard Evie crying. I was gonna give her medicine." Of course, Joanne didn't hear the baby crying. And so, of course, Richard comes out and, "What's going on?" And she's like, "I didn't do anything." And, it turns into a big argument. So when Joanne had asked, like, what was she doing? She dropped the bottle. And so, of course, that medicine is useless now. And so she's like, why are you acting like this? I didn't do anything. I was just going to give her some medicine, which was, I don't know. If there is no baby crying, why would you need to give the baby medicine? And then even if the baby was crying, I don't know that she authorized you to administer medication to the baby. And she didn't trust her to begin with. So why would you be giving the baby medicine? So that was kind of weird in itself. So she did not trust Chloe at all. So she wanted to find out a little bit more about what had happened, because her mom died when she was young, and so it seemed as though she was traumatized. The little information that she got from Richard was that her mom had committed suicide. So little by little, she's realizing that initially Richard had told her that she died of some illness. I want to say he said cancer, but I can't recall if I'm correct in my memory. But I think he said a long illness, which was not really the truth. He kind of twisted it a little bit. So as she was asking, he was saying, well, I said a long illness, but he was suggesting that she was depressed. And then later it led to that she committed suicide because she had fallen off a third floor balcony in the house that they were at. And so, little details that kept coming out made Joanne question whether she can really trust Chloe, and she's starting to feel like she's dangerous. So anyway, one day she was home, and Richard was going to go out of town, and they had been having some issues with Chloe, and just the little wedge that the whole situation is driving between the two of them. So he was supposed to go out on a business meeting, and he was feeling like he couldn't trust Joanne to be there with the baby, and Joanne had to kind of appease him a little bit, and he asked for Roxanne to come over and stay. And Roxanne was a younger lady who came over and did the cleaning, so he wanted to take the baby and do a bunch of stuff because he was saying that he didn't trust Joanne. So they agreed to have Roxanne come over and help with the baby. So he called, and she was like, okay. And then Chloe later came to her, and she tried to talk to her about the past and try to understand what's happening, but she mentioned how, it was her dad, things that her dad did, and bringing up some things that made her question whether Richard was telling the truth and whether Richard was dangerous. So now, instead of her feeling like Chloe's the dangerous one, now she's questioning whether if it's Richard she should be afraid of. So this whole thing turns out really crazy in the end, because now she doesn't really know who to trust. And so based on what Chloe was telling her, when Richard came home, some things that Chloe had said to her, she was noticing like maybe Chloe's telling the truth. And based on the fact that Richard was so, it's like drip drop of information about the past, and it wasn't quite true what he said, it was vague enough to could potentially be true, but not. And so she decided that she had to get away from Richard. Firstly, Chloe had taken the baby and said she had to protect the baby and all this. So some things developed. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe Chloe wasn't so bad after all. So they had to get out the house and wanted to get away. All right, so we thought this was the end of the book. I'm like, all right, the crazy person saved the day. And so there was another twist at the end of the book where I was like, oh my goodness. She had visited Chloe's grandma, who was her mom's mom, and some things that her mom had mentioned made her question everything that she thought she knew. And I was just like, oh no, what happened? I am scared for her now. And so this one was a great one. This is the first one that I've read from this author, but you know, this one was just up and down and around and around. Chloe was annoying, but it was still a good book. I would give this one 4 stars. If you have read or listened to this book, let me know your thoughts. Until next time.